Be'ezer Hashem, Parshas Kisavoy, Tovshin Pei Gimel. The Chovos HaLevavos in Sha'ar B'tochen Perek Daled mentions a Gemara in Masechtas Shabbos, also mentioned in Masechtas Tainis Daf Chof, about the topic that a person shouldn't put himself into a dangerous matzav, to a dangerous situation. La'olam al yamid odem amokum sakana. A person shouldn't put himself in danger, and he shouldn't use bitochen as a teretz or something that I'm standing here, but the Baruch Hashem is going to help me. And the Gemara says, why? Because Shema ein oisen lo nes. If a nes is needed to save you, it doesn't mean that necessarily the Baruch Hashem is going to make a nes for you. And even if yes, ve'im oisen lo nes, menakal lo mischu Yosef. Menakal lo mischu Yosef means that the person's schar, when it comes in Olam Haba, he might lose from his schar. Simple pshat is because he's already eating from his schar. Because you weren't supposed to be having a nes, and you forced it, you squeezed a nes. So it's coming from your schar, and you're losing off it because the person who's coming to Olam Haba is going to see that he already ate up his schar. This is the concept. So the Chovos HaLevavos uses that as an umbrella to the concept why a person is supposed to always do the proper ishtadlus. Why is it needed? Why can't I just say, Hashem is going to do an es with me? So the Chovos HaLevavos says, let me explain to you. First of all, if a nes is needed, it could be you're not worthy, it could be you're not roi, and a nes is not going to happen. Because a nes only happens to people when the Rebbeinu Hashem decides that you're roi, you're a keli to be able to be mekabel that nes. And even if Hashem decides yes to give you the nes, you might be paying a very heavy price. It's like saying, it's a funny example, we'll say it anyways. Sometimes you travel internationally, and your phone sometimes doesn't have service. Sometimes it does have service, but if you dare speak, then you find out how much you pay for it. What's the pshat? Because it's not really meant for this. So you find yourself with a bill. That's Bam is the concept. Menakol mischu Yosef of the pshat. It was a Olam Haba type of food, which it's meant to get that schar in Olam Haba. If you somehow got it in this world, it's chaval, because you're going to get up there, you're going to be missing it. You pay very expensive for that. That's why a person not only shouldn't put himself in a dangerous matzav. This is what broadens the topic. Just any Indian which you decide deliberately that you want to rely on the Rebbeinu Hashem, he's going to make an es. You don't want to work hard to try to make it work with their chateva. You're saying the Rebbeinu is really going to make an es. If you're doing that, even if it works out, but it wasn't worth it for you, even if you had a nes. This is the concept. This is the Gemara. On the other hand, there are many Mamorei Chazal that if a person has a nes and says shira, that's one of the midrashim, moichem lekol avinosav. That means sometimes we find that having a nes is a Kiddush Hashem, and the Rebbeinu Hashem is excited that there was a nes. The Rebbeinu Hashem is happy and wants to make nisim. Even on Hanukkah we have this topic. If a person forgets to say Ala Nisim, so in the end of Birchas Hamazon, there's a nusach, a person should say instead, Harachamanu Yashalanu Nisim. So the poskim discuss the concept, are you allowed to ask for Nisim? So now we're not looking at it from the aspect in halacha, if you're allowed to be mispalo for a nes. We're learning the topic, is it a good thing when a nes happens? And it's like a Kiddush Hashem and a Gilu Shechina, wow, Baruch Hashem, Al Nisecha Sheb'chol Yom V'Yom, we thank the Rebbeinu Hashem. Or is it something which Hashem didn't want that this nes should happen? Now this topic is something that's very important in the concepts of bitachon that we're learning, and the sugyas of bitachon that we're learning, because whenever a person has a nisoyin, if he should do ishtadlus, if he should not do ishtadlus, and he's thinking to himself, what's the problem? It'll be even a bigger Kiddush Hashem. That's the question. Maybe, maybe not. There's a lot of Gemaras about it. Now, another point to bring up before we discuss actually when it's a good thing or not, is that it's very interesting, this concept of Menachal Mischu Yosef. It's very rare that Chazal should say that if you do something that's wrong, then we're going to erase some points. You just lost 10 points. It's interesting, because usually, if it's a mitzvah, then you get schar. If it's something you were not supposed to do, you get a einish. You get a punishment. It's reward and punishment. Since when do we have in Chazal, we usually don't find that we shouldn't say, okay, you're not getting a punishment, we're also not going to give you a reward. What we're going to do is, we're going to open up your books and we're going to say, okay, erase. Why would that be the result of a nest that happens to a person? It's an interesting musig. So, there are many Gemaras, and actually this concept is mentioned in Kedushas Levi from Vaditcherov, but we'll see soon, we're going to learn a Gemara inside, that they try to explain this musig like that. It works. We should understand how this works. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants to make nisim for people that are ready for such a type of anhoga. For a person that's right now in the matzav, he was elevated, he's now prepared, and his darga, his level where he's up to, is that he could have right now a nes. But for someone that's not yet up to that level, it's not good for the person to have a nes. Not good for you. And if it's not good for you, so I can't say that I'm going to give you a oynish for it, a punishment, but what I could say is Menachal Mischu Yosef. Menachal Mischu Yosef is going to mean that you just fell down to Madregas. Upstairs in Shemayim, the schar, of course, is not in a form of paying you with money or with candy or something like that. It's about the levels of understanding Rebbeinu Shalom, Hanhogas Rebbeinu Shalom, which is going to bring the person, he could be connected to Rebbeinu Shalom. And that's going to be the most pleasurable feeling that a person could have, and all kinds of, but that's the schar. A person only reaches that when they reach a certain level. If a person does a wrong move, then, and Hashem would make a nes for him, it could mess up the person's madrega, which is going to, the result of that is, that means right now, he fell a little bit. That's something that we could rather understand it better. Any information that's given to, let's say, a child, when the child is not yet in the darga of understanding that, it could mess you up. It would be better if you wouldn't have had that information, because you're too young. Your mind is not yet mature enough to be able to handle this information. B'chlal, trauma to any person at any age is explained to be that a picture is 1,000 words. What's a video? So now if a person experiences something that's overwhelming and they're not capable of really understanding what happened because it's so sharp and it's so deep and it's so overwhelming, so it could ruin the kelim of the person. It ruins you. Now you have to fix it. And many times when people are in the middle of climbing to set themselves up, and then they had how did they say it? Setback. What's shot in that setback? Because a person is very, very sensitive, and slowly they're trying to take out old trauma, whatever it is, and they feel, oh, Baruch Hashem, I feel like a person now. I feel like I could already go back and speak to whoever it is. And then they weren't yet ready. They thought that they're healed emotionally until they went to a simcha they went to a wedding and they met whatever it was, whoever it is, and then it all caved in. And it was a massive setback. That's the pshat. That is the concept, that you weren't really ready. You thought you were ready. So it wasn't good for you to speak, to socialize. You weren't ready for it. Unless, in order that it should do good for a person, it's only in the time that they're ready for it. Hidden nisim is not a problem. The Rebbeinu Shalom constantly, every single day, does for each and every one of us thousands and millions of hidden nisim. That's what the Ramban says in Sof Parshas Boy. Nisim anistorim, but if you believe in it, it helps you understand this nisim niglam. But something that's like an openness, it's not going to be good for you. And one of the reasons how to explain it, why it's not good for the person, is like you could sometimes see people that they went to a caver, let's say, of a tzaddik, and they squeezed out an S. And it's a true. Be'emes, they had a Yeshua. But then sometimes you could see those people that they became unhealthy people because of it. Emotionally, most important, ruchniusdik, spiritually, it hurt them. You know why? Because in their head, now they learned that it's a game. So they already know the secret. They're already traveling back every zach that they need. They have this gula. They're messing up their relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's one example how sometimes a ness could be not so good for you. It will be much better and healthier if you climb and you work out your muscles and you become a strong person. Strong we mean spiritually, that slowly you build your ruchnius. And then you're set. Fundamentally, it's gesund. Yisoid yizdik. This is the concept that we want to learn today. Now, if a person is already on a higher madrega and he's already ro'oi for a nest, Hashem makes a nest with him, then it's beautiful. Then it's gewaldig. That's the concept of olam chotira b'chayecha. That means a person could, if the person really goes the derech arucha, that means they don't skip any steps. Then, if they have a nest, it's not going to be Menachem Eschei Yosef. This is the concept. One of the interesting makoiros to this idea, but that's the hidden nisim. Yeah, when we thank Al Nisecha Shabchol Yom V'Yimonu, that's the hidden nisim. The Ramban in the end of Parshas Bo calls it nisim nistorim, which that doesn't hurt a person. And the biggest raya to that is that people walk around saying, what's new? Nothing. Regular. I mean, they're totally not there. They're not plugged in to the nisim that they're having. So it's for the good and for the bad. Mostly for the bad, that they're not connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom. But for the good, it means that what they're not supposed to know, they don't know. They say an interesting story about one of the famous tzaddikim, that he was zoichet to Ruach HaKodesh, and people came for brachas to him, and he had this conflict, because at the same time, the people came and cried that their father of theirs is in a big sakana and he's about to die. The Rebbe should give a bracha, they should stay alive. A second later, someone came in that his wife is going to give birth, and she's not being matzliach, and she's in labor, and she's in a massive sakana. And this tzaddik knew the distant shama of that older person is supposed to go into this baby, and it's one or the other. And he froze, and then he said, "Eibush to take away the madrigas. I don't want to see, because if you see, it could be very painful." And it's the hemshech to that story. Back to what we're learning, there's a certain toiv that we don't know what's going on, because a person would use up all the energy hoping that he's going to digest the food, like skipping heartbeat, if his marechet is going to be working today. Nisim Nistorim doesn't hurt. Nisim Niglem, That's the Olam Habadige type of life. Having Olam Habadige type of life in this world, if you're not roid, it's Menachal Emuschal Yosef. Because the pshat is you're already eating that kind of schar. You weren't meant. It's not such a good marshal, but I could bring it at him in a simple manner. There's something called a spoiler. That means when you're reading a novel, and then you have someone tells you the last chapter, he just killed it. Because now you're not enjoying. When a person is living Olam Haba type of life here, he's ruining his Olam Haba. You're not supposed to live Olam Haba type of life unless a person worked on themselves and entered Olam Haba because he walked in. He made a chana for Shabbos and he was Moshe Nefesh for Shabbos, and then he felt something. That Olam Haba feeling. That's fine because you didn't take from there. But a person went into a dangerous matzav, and that's why he was able to nes nigla, that you just ate out of your Olam Haba. And that's not good for you. Now, we said there's a Gemara, a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara says, interesting story, Tainas Daf Chof. Rav Huna havaleyahu chamre bahu beiser. Rav Huna had wine, but it was in a house that was about to fall down. There was a sakana to go into the house. And Rav Huna wanted to take out the wine before the house falls down. But he had to enter the danger zone to be able to take out the wine. So what he did was, there was a big tzaddik, Rav Ada bar Ahava, and he felt Rav Huna, oh, he's a good candidate. And when he comes into this house, nothing's going to happen. So he started schmoozing and learning with Rav Ada bar Ahava, slowly, and he walked into that house. Rav Ada bar Ahava shon chap. Mashche b'shmaitze adepanye. And he kept on talking and learning until he was done. Taking the wine, doing everything that he needs to, making sure Rav Ada bar Ahava is on premises. Bossed the Nafaka, they walked out. Nafal Beise. It came crashing down. Argish Rav Ada bar Ahava. Rav Ada bar Ahava, he chap what happened now. He realized that he just brought me in there because he knew it's a Makam Sakana. Ikpit. And he was makbid, he was upset. Why was he upset? Nothing happened, Baruch Hashem. Zog the Gemara, Sovala, because of this Maimah Chazal that we started this year, because it says that you shouldn't be Makam Sakana. Because maybe a nest is not going to happen, and if a nest does happen, Menachal Emuschal Yosef. So Rav Ada bar Ahava was upset. Why did you do that? Now, if we try to analyze the Gemara, Baruch Hashem, nothing happened. But Rav Yanai says that even if nothing happens, you might have paid a price. So he was upset. Why did he do that? You know that it could have costed me now a lot of schusim. That's the pashas of the Kfeda. That's the Gemara. Now, the Marsha, in Tainis Daf Chof, on this Gemara, the Marsha says, so why did Rav Huna do it? Rav Huna was just smart aleck. Rav Huna. So the Marsha says that Rav Huna felt that Rav Ada bar Ahava was a big enough tzaddik. But Rav Ada bar Ahava about himself, he was an onav, he was humble, so he didn't feel that he's such a big enough tzaddik. But the Marsha doesn't explain, doesn't elaborate. You could learn pshat in the Marsha that Rav Ada bar Ahava felt he's not a big enough tzaddik, and it might fall down on him. And Rav Huna felt nothing's going to happen. Why? Because he's a big enough tzaddik, nothing's going to happen. But it's more mashma. I saw people learn that much. If you think it's the pshat, that it does include part 2, which means that if you are a big enough tzaddik, then not only the house is not going to fall down, it's also not going to hurt you in the schusim. So Rav Huna felt comfortable to take Rav Ada bar Ahava in there, not only because he knew Eshtazach not going to fall down. Rav Huna is a tzaddik. If Rav Huna knew this Gemara, the Mashal is trying to explain that. So it's not right. The Rav Huna should do something which could hurt Rav Ada bar Ahava, could take away his chusim. The answer is Rav Huna felt Rav Ada bar Ahava is big enough tzaddik that for him, if such an as happens, it's fine, because like we just mentioned earlier, that it's someone that's already in that darga, and there's no difference between Nisim Nistar and Nisim Niglim. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt you. So forget it. It's a beautiful Gemara, the Mashah, which explains that it has to do with your Tzaddik Gomer. So something interesting, I wouldn't think to connect that Gemara, but there's a different Gemara in Masechta, a very famous Gemara. The Gemara says in Brochos Daf Chof, Omer Daf Popula Abaya, why the earlier generations Rishonim, why were they Zoiche to Nisim, Israchash Lo Nisa, and why aren't we Zoiche? We daven and he says we learn so much more than them. We have 13 Mesifta, we learn all types of Limudim, but we don't have Nisim. And the Gemara says, you know why they got Nisim? Because because the earlier generations had bigger Mesiras Nefesh on Kiddush Hashem, so they had more Nisim. We don't have that Darga Mesiras Nefesh, or we do a lot of learning, but it's not. We're not on that level to be able to have Nisim. I think it's a beautiful dimyan to what we're learning, because once again the Gemara is saying that Nisim, Eibusha could do Nisim all the time, but if the Eibusha does a nest for you, and it's not now the matzav that you should have a nest, then it's like eating unhealthy food. You're being fed something which is not appropriate for the darga that you are. So that's why I'm not making Nisim. So that's Moise Nefesh. Since Moise Nefesh, in a certain sense, it's like he went to Olam Haba. He gave everything away. There's nothing going on. Nothing. Say that if you're living that type of life, then a ness is not going to be. It's not going to hurt you. Now let's elaborate on the Lamaisidige aspect of this shir. Where it's negeya the most is when people have they have a dilemma. If they did ishtadlus, I didn't do ishtadlus. Why do I need to do ishtadlus? People sometimes feel this feeling when they're desperate. Eibishter, what is it for you to make a ness? It's nothing. It's the same thing. If it's the same thing for you to make a nest, why don't you make a nest for me? It makes no difference. It's not harder for the Eibishter to make a nest than Teva. So many Sforim say, but the Rebbe wants to run this world with their Chateva. It's a b'diavad if he makes it, but why? In simple language, it's not harder for the Eibishter, but it's not good for you. It could turn into that it is going to be good for you in this same tzorah that you have. Not like in 20 years from now, but if you elevate yourself to a certain higher level of emunah and bittul to the Rebbeinu Shalom, then tomorrow's day could bring that you should be zoiche to that ness. But today, the time hasn't come yet. Really, that's the yesod of the geula of be'ito nachishena, which means the Rebbeinu Shalom can bring the geula, but we are not yet. We didn't go through all kinds of avodah and bittul to the Rebbeinu Shalom, that when the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to geula in this matziv, it's going to do good for us. Because if a person is on a low darga on Avodas Hashem and doesn't really chap how to form a true relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom and true bittul and all that, then you're going to bring him a Beis Hamikdash. Shine, Asta Beis Hamikdash with Korbanos, but he's busy statusing away. I mean, the guy is so not here. For who? You think it's Bachlal, not a joke. If we think it is not going to work, and the people that are going to lose the most are the people, because they lost opportunity. They lost opportunity to elevate themselves and to be zoiche to Olam Haba and to become bigger than a malach by working through the choshech and trying again and falling and talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's building you. The Rebbeinu Shalom has a problem to make a nest right now this second. It's not a problem. But think about it. It's toiv. Now people, when they're in that choshech, it's so tough because people are in a real deep struggle. It's not, something minor. In a deep struggle. And they're like, why? Why am I going through this? And it's such a chaval that Rebbeinu Shalom wants to tell them, you're going through this because what you're doing right now is building your future, is building your whole mitzvah, your essence, this back and forth. And your man just told me the other day that he was going through a rough situation, and people were trying to comfort him. People came over to him and again and told him, I feel so bad, I feel terrible. So the way he responded was, he told them, would you stop it? And the people would constantly come back to it again. But how's your family doing it? So one time he told his friend, could I tell you something? I'm in the middle of a private conversation with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Would you butt out? That's what he said. He said, the Rebbeinu Shalom's talking to me. Why are you interfering? It's a private conversation. And that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom is expecting the person to do from those struggles. To take themselves and have a deeper understanding, to calm themselves down, to get up after you fall, which by that you're preparing Kalim for Nes. That's making you into a person that's going to be an Olam Habadige person. Now once you're an Olam Habadige person, sometimes you're going to be Zoichet Olam Haba in that world, sometimes this world. Doesn't make much of a difference. But you turn yourself into a person that's a Roi for Nisim Niglim. We learned a new term in this Shir. The Nes Nigla is the Sprach, is the language of Olam Haba. It's a very important term. And this is, if we connect the two, it explains many Mamorim that we're used to, and we heard it so many times, but not always that we connect the dots to really comprehend. For example, someone does a mitzvah, and Chas v'Sholom, he passes away, he was nifta. And the Gemara says in the end of Chulun, but it says L'man Yarichun Yamecha. And the Gemara discusses, sometimes it can be an Olam Haba. But where's the schar? Zu Torah v'zu schara? Sometimes it's in this world, sometimes in that world. And people get irritated. People feel like it's a cop-out, this kind of answer. I can never get you, because if you don't see the schar, say it could be somewhere else, the schar. What does it mean schar? It's very immature to say the schar is, and I give you $100. That's not schar. Schar is the understanding and the curious of the kim, which comes from dargas, from becoming close to Sir Rebbeinu Shalom. And that's the biggest tainik for a person. Now, Nisim Nigla mean that. A Nes Nigla, that Hashem revealed himself. Kriyas Yamsov, everything is open, you see it. That is schar. That's a Olam Haba. That's going to be an Olam Haba. If a person does a mitzvah, that's the result of the mitzvah. That's the result. That's what it means schar. A person that was zoichet to be mekayim a mitzvah, Hashem says, okay, you just gained that you could now be masik the Rebbeinu Shalom, mainly when a person leaves the guf, but it shines in to a person a little bit even in this world. If a person didn't see it, it's officially meant that hayom la'asayis mochal kabel schorim, because as long as a person is in a body, it's hard for a person to be able to be masik the Rebbeinu Shalom. But that's schar. It's always that's going to be the form of schar. If it's an olam haza, if it's an olam haba. A tzaddik gomor, which is be'emes ready to be able to handle such language in olam haza, so it's not a problem. It's not menaklim Yisrael Yosef. And sometimes a person is in that matzav of tzaddik gomor, but it happens rare. But
the doctors told her Stein years before you're living, it doesn't make sense that you're alive. They would examine him and say, it doesn't make sense that you're alive. It's coming from someplace else.
It's coming from someplace else. It stimmt nicht. It's a Nes Nigla. It's a many tzaddikim. But They put themselves into that matziv, so they were royal. So that's why the Gemara says, you don't be a smart aleck and go b'makom sakana or do risky zachem, because even if you're going to gain, but if it was a nes, a person comes into shul, he said he has a nes. I have a murdiga story for you. Yeah. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's too good. That's the aside. That a person has to try to ask the Rebbeinu Shlem that they should be zoicha to have an haggadah which is fit for them, which is good for them. Chana asked the Rebbeinu Shlem for a child Shmuel Hanavi that he should be like chacham v'letipsha, means it has to fit. A shidduch has to fit. If it's someone that's amazing but it's not a good match, forget about if they're going to stay married. It doesn't build you. It doesn't make you live, because it's not a match for you. The hanhaga from the Rebbeinu Shalom is supposed to match the darg of the person and the behavior of the person. That's the state of midah keneged midah. It's a deeper understanding in midah keneged midah, a whole new understanding. Not only Hashem gives you schar and oynish. What happens is that you always roi for a language, like a mother talks to a little child, kid talk, but once the kid is older, so you talk differently. So Hashem reveals Himself to you as much as you where you are. That's the system. If you want to break that system, it might work once or twice, but it doesn't mean that it was healthy for your matziv. It gives a person chizik, so a person should understand what's going on. A person should know what's going on, and also it should help the person make right decisions when they want to try to play a risky game. In Brisk, there was a big fire, and in the olden times, everything was built from wood, and it was traveling from house to house, and there was in the end of the city, there was someone that had a major factory, which was worth a lot of money, and it was in danger of burning down. So someone that's like an investor, or rather like a flip, he came to the owner of the factory. He said, "Listen, you see the situation. I'm willing to buy off your factory right now for 50%. The guy said no. Okay? The fire was traveling, and then it was really close. He said, "Listen, I'm giving you another chance, but right now I'm not giving you 50% for this, but I'll give you 25%. He said no. Then it was like next door. He told him, "I'll give you 10%. The guy said no, and they were successful in stopping the fire, and he gained 100% of his business, and he was so excited. And he came to the Briskerov, and Briskerov said, "I'm not impressed. You did a bad move. Because you actually were matzliach, it doesn't mean you're smart. If at the time you were playing that risk, I don't see you as a big chacham." Okay.
How is a person supposed to make that? How is a person supposed to know which matzav he should sell or he should?
So selling and buying is something like people don't really think Toiletic usually. Then they're only thinking like, what are the chances, and they're refreshing to find out if the stocks are going up and down. But the Toiletic mahal, if you can bemis, no, that's why. There are people that go and they say that they had in 96 they had 40 shares in Apple, and then they sold it, and if they wouldn't have sold it, they would have been billionaires today. Now, but that's why you sold it. Why did you sell it? You're not a billionaire. Why? Because that's the ganze Meise. Because then it wasn't worth anything. That means a person can't know b'derech hateva what's going to be. You could see mahalchim, but they always trick you, and not always there's a toiledige blick if you have to sell or not to sell. And usually a person sees, they see afterwards, they look back and they see, I should have, I could have, all kinds of such mahalchim. But it's basharet for a person, what he gained and what he didn't gain. It's more the concept when it comes to Avodas Hashem. When a person says, Al Ya'am Makom Sakana, so a person knows that that's the halacha. Al Ya'am Makom Sakana, don't do anything risky.
I've heard people say, when it came time they had to marry off their children, and somebody will tell them, listen, take loans, promise lots of money. That's what everybody in Eretz Yisrael, it's all nisim. Ask anybody, how did they manage to do it? Nisim happened. You do it, nisim will happen.
When it comes to marrying off children, which is a mitzvah, a person is supposed to do that extra stretch to do what he's supposed to. That means when a person is saying, I'm going to borrow $1 million to buy off of a company, and I live in Eitzol, there's nisim, ein Hashem alakach. Hashem's going to help me pay back. I don't know how. So a person has no right. When a person comes to marrying off children, a person has to marry off the children. So sometimes it means you have to take a loan, you take a loan. That's the derech ha'olam. But what's going to be? They're going to make a mess. Because you have to do what you need to do. You can't say it in something that's voluntary. You could say it when it comes to a mitzvah. So that's a problem. Lev Rosh of Leishan is a very big problem. But if a person is going to do whatever they could, they were just going to help him. It's not, it means, it's a fine line between a person that says, I'm just going to borrow money, then Hashem's going to make a mess, versus a person that says, listen, Eshazach, I have to marry off this child, and that's the right thing, I'm going to do it, the most limited, whatever is possible. And then listen, if I can't pay back, I'm going to go collect, I'm going to do whatever's needed. I know I'm going to have to do whatever I need to do. I'm not just leaving go and saying Hashem is going to do nisim. That's not a proper oizgehalten weg. But a person constantly has to chaza this yisoid that I don't want to skip steps because I don't want to eat up my Olam Haba. I want to work it out. Odom l'omel yulat. It's hard, it's choshech, but right now that's what's making me do it right. When people go for, they have to get their foot to work against therapy, is another word, physical therapy. That means they want to work it out. I don't want to be handicapped. I don't want to be that I gain now short term, but then what am I? A child, if you spoil them, you give them, it's not good for them. But if they learn how to share, and they learn how to take a disappointment, many people, you could find teenagers when they discover it. There's a lot of yisoidis that you don't have to even talk about, but life is going to teach it. They're going to realize it. Now you could give them the right environment, so they should come to the right conclusions through their situations. But slowly, that's how you build yourself. You have to share. You have to be able to handle the disappointments when you had a shifa for something, you had a very sharp rossum for something. But constantly, a person's building, and that doesn't stop. From 40 to 50, from 50 to 60, from 60 to 70. And Hashem prepares every person with situations which are slowly helping them. That's why there's never a dull moment. There's never a dull moment. And the reason for that is because, what's the point? If you don't find any solution for the matzavim that you are in, that's fine. That's going to force the person to daven. That's going to force the person to work something out. But any matzav that a person is in, they have to cash in. Any nisayon. Cashing in on nisayon means, what did I learn from it? What does it mean that I should be learning? Which concept am I supposed to be working out from this nisayon? Because that's the name of it. And to try to do shortcuts, even with the Rebbeinu Shalom, shortcuts, even if it works, is not something that's really building your Mahaba. It might be doing the opposite. But when a person feels that they got their Yeshua when they were ready, that's mamish. It's not only doesn't take away from your Mahaba. It lets you take a glimpse on your Haba in this world. There's no bigger simcha for a person that got a ness when they were ready. People could feel it a lot of times. It's a child which if people feel it came from a muna. It came from after I gave up all the other mahalchim. That's when the Eibishter gave it to me. That's a big yisoid in the working out of a person. Kriyas Yamsuf, when Yidden were by the Yamsuf, the Eibishter wanted to do it to them, but they needed Mesiras Nefesh. Matitzek Elai, Moshe Rabbeinu said, Daba b'nei Yisrael v'Yisrael, which means you want I should split the sea, but I can't split the sea. But what I could do for you is I could give you the right Eitzah. If you're Moshe Nefesh, that's going to make it on its own. That Maimah that Rebbeinu Shalom says is to every person. Matitzek Elai. Why are you screaming? Bizach Moshe Nefesh. It means start, go, do. Once you're going to do, you're going to be raw with it. And then it's just going to happen. That's one of the big yisoides, why the Eibusher says to do ishtadlis. Jump in. And the jumping in is a certain type of Mesiras Nefesh. Okay.